So far, we have covered why you need a lead lag study, what is it about, and the first steps you need to do it. Now we turn to the revenue lags. Revenue lags come in four flavors. There's the service lag, which is the period between two meter reads. There's the billing lag, which is from the last read till you invoice customers. Then there's the collection lag, which is about the time it takes for customers to pay you. And then there's the processing lag, which is the time it takes for the payments to be available to you. With respect to the service lag, it has to be specific to each class because most of the time the actual service lag will be different for each class. Also, we're going to use the midpoint method with respect to service lag. The reason is lead lag study is about measuring start and end date, or when you provide a service and when you get paid for it. In the case of electric service, it's provided on a continuous basis. So we must find a way to decide when is the start date. In this case, the midpoint method basically averages the start and end date of the meter reads. Also, you will have to weight the actual service lag per customer class based on the relative importance of each class. So basically, it's customer weighting. In this case, again from Hydro Ottawa, we can see the average number of customers and then the customer weighting, which reflects the actual number of customers. We can also see that the midpoint method more or less averages the start and end date of the service period. In the case of residential, because they're on bi-monthly, the midpoint is about 1 month. And we can see the same for customers on a monthly service. They have their midpoint at about 2 weeks, which is just in between 1 month. The reason why service lag is it is weighted by customers is that if we were to add all the midpoint, the actual service lag for the utility would be far more important than what it is actually. So by weighting based on customers, we obtain a service lag that's a lot more reasonable. Then comes the billing lag. Again, this one should also be specific to each customer class. However, instead of being customer weighted, it should be revenue weighted because at that point, because you have a meter read, you're able to define or calculate the actual sales per customer class. Again, a table from Hydro Ottawa. The average customer is provided for information only. What is important is the actual sales, and you can see that by using revenue weighting instead of customer weighting, the importance of residential is somewhat reduced. In this case, you can also see that the number of days between the last meter read and the invoicing is different from each class. And as expected, the larger customers tend to have a shorter invoicing period. Again, once it's revenue weighted, we obtain the weighted lag. And in this case, for Hydro Ottawa, the billing lag is about 18.24 days. Once billing is done and invoicing is done, there's the collection lag. So how long does it take for customers to pay you? There's basically two ways to find out. There's days sales outstanding and then accounts receivable. This more or less depends on your accounting system. So in this table, what we can see is the first few columns are the actual amounts of sales outstanding for each of the month identified, and also the number of days and then the total sales for that month. Basically, what we're looking for in this collection lag is the number of days or the amount that you need to sustain for your operation. In this case, Hydro Ottawa basically had $61,426 of outstanding sales for January compared to sales of 65,733. So in this case, the total outstanding divided by total sales times the number of days in the month will provide the number of days where sales are outstanding. So in this case, it's roughly between 25 and 30 days. In this table, the number of months goes from until July, but obviously in any lead lag study, the actual period should cover all 12 months. The processing lag, that's the time it takes for the money to be available once it has been cashed in. So it's more or less the bank float. You'll need to see if there's any bank float for your utility and if there's any different delays with the different payment methods you allow your customer to pay you. In this case, the weighting should be based on the sales paid per payment method. For example, if 90% of your customers pay by internet, the sales or and the processing lag for internet should be around should be weighted about 90%, and the other payment method would receive the difference. Once we've done the revenue lags, we move on to expenses. Expense leads is somewhat simpler because there's only the service lead, sorry, and also the payment lead, which is the equivalent of collection. So service is the time between when service is provided and billed to you, and the payment lead is basically the time it takes for you to pay your suppliers and vendors. In this first example, we look at compensation costs at Hydro Ottawa. Labor or compensation costs are like uh, electric service. It's provided on a continuous basis. So we also need to use the midpoint method to calculate the actual lead for compensation. And also, I'd like to point out that in some instances, benefits are paid in advance of receiving the service. For example, if you have collective insurance for your staff, but you have to pay them before the month starts, in this case, you actually pay the benefits before you actually benefit from your staff um, work. So in this case, the benefit is a negative lead, which basically means you've paid for it before you receive service. Again, there's also some weighting with respect to the different leads in this case, and that should be proportional to the actual dollar amounts of payroll, benefits, and other compensation. In the second example, we look at more generally at all the expenses. So in this case, we have the payroll and benefits we just covered, and then other items on expenses. The actual breakdown is open to each utility. It depends on what your accounting system provides. So in this case, again, also there's a weighting based on the actual amount. So in this case, compensation should take a larger part of the service and payment leads. And obviously, when you collect revenues from your customers and you pay bills to your suppliers, you also collect and pay taxes. Your lead lag study should have a separate section on HST, or the taxes you pay, and the actual calculation should also reflect how HST is treated within your utility.